Welcome to Melody Makers, where we discuss arranging and composing and meet the real melody makers behind the music of Melody's traditional music, folkharp.com, and Afghan press music for the harp. I'm Gretchen Munson, harpist, pianist, organist, and arranger, and your host for today. In today's episode, we have a special guest with us. Sunita Staneslow is an advocate for traditional folk harp music, traveling internationally and introducing others to the joys of music with her harp and culture tours. Before we chat with Sunita, let's get a taste of her beautiful work. This piece is from her newest book, Shetland Tunes.
It's called the Hummin. It means twilight. And though it wasn't twilight when I was playing, the light is so different under the trees.
Good morning, Sunita.
Hi, good afternoon.
So what do you remember about the first time you ever saw or heard a harp?
Well, I actually can't remember. I just remember we had tickets often to the Minnesota Orchestra, and there was a harp there. So, I noticed it and noticed it when it did solos, but my eyes were always on the flute. And, looking back, I just feel so fortunate. I grew up on a very musical street. All my friends learned instruments, and there were neighbors down the street that were friends of ours that played flute in the orchestra. And we had dinner there one night, and I really wanted to play flute. I'm a melody person. And I was in second grade, and I said, oh, can I try the flute? Do you think I could learn to play the flute? Could you be my teacher? And she brought the flute out, and she said, look, your fingers are too small. Wait till fifth grade. That's when everybody starts in band, because, you need fingers to grow. That it's not like violin where you get a quarter size. Unless you wanted to start on piccolo, which I don't recommend. So she said, why don't you play harp like Leah? And because her daughter played the harp. Her daughter was a few years younger than me. That was like a whole new idea. And I'd seen a harp before, and then I saw her harp, and then I told my mom, maybe I should play the harp. And I had started piano in first grade. My mom was like, yeah, everybody wants to play the harp. That's so nice. No. And then I wanted it even more. What do you mean? I'm serious. You didn't take me seriously. I really want to play the harp. I don't think I was very serious, but it was just the idea of it that, it seemed more interesting now that it's harder to get. Oh, maybe I really do want the harp. This sounds intriguing. And, it wasn't hard to get. So, my great-grandmother actually gave money for us to buy the Troubadour, Lion and Healy Troubadour, in the music store window in Minneapolis. And there was someone in high school, Mary Balian, down the street, who played the harp, and she started teaching me. So it just kind of came to me, maybe because, I don't know, there was some, the power of suggestion. What if Adele Zeitlin with the orchestra hadn't said, oh, why don't you play the harp? The power of just offering things to people, and just keep that in mind, like for kids, oh, what about this or what about that? We kind of, I think a lot of people have these stories that, they dreamed about playing the harp for 20 years or 50 years, and finally, and mine was a bit more of a whim, but then I think I was hooked because you can play melody and accompaniment, and it was special. It was, it sounds cool. My younger brother played French horn, sounded really bad for a while. My older brother with bassoon, and I could sit down and play the harp. So the harp just kept sounding better and better. And I could play the harp in the living room. Everybody's relegated to the basement or their bedroom. So I learned the flute in fifth grade, though. I really wanted to play flute, and I played flute all the way through high school.
Fantastic. That is so special. And you are known currently for folk harp. And you started on the Troubadour. Did you ever transition more to pedal at some point in your career and then back, or was it always folk harp?
No, it was classical all the way. That's how, I started the harp in the 70s, and that's how you learned. Everyone got a Troubadour. There was only a few handful of books, and then you went on to pedal harp. Now, we were all naive about that. We just thought, wow, okay, I got a harp. And then it's like, oh, now she's going to be ready for a pedal harp, and you have to order years in advance, to get in line for a Lion and Healy harp. And then my mother, I think, and parents, my dad, she was like, oh, what did we get into? They had no idea. And it was like this idea of progressing. And then you'd have youth orchestra and all these different options that was not really given as this option. Oh, you could really learn to do all this kind of cool Celtic harp stuff, because very few people did. So I went the whole classical route. I ended up with a pedal harp. I was in youth orchestra, even won a concerto contest in senior year of high school or junior year of high school with a flutist, and played the Mozart, and really tied to the notes in classical. And I think, I took harp seriously, but I did so many other things too. It wasn't really until as an adult that I found my own voice, because I was part of the generation that had a very limited repertoire. And it's beautiful. I love the Ravel introduction, Allegro, the Mozart. I love these pieces, but they were always, put on a pedestal and competitive. I did all the competitions for the American Harp Society. I kept going with that. I don't know why. So here I was, I was 13 or something, and I went to the American Harp Society competition. I slipped out of the top bunk bed and got a concussion, and I still played. I was like, heaving in the bathroom. Then I go and I play, and I'm just thinking, oh, I didn't wash my hair. But it was just like, okay, classical, of course, no matter what, even if it kills me, So, it was a change of deciding what I want to do as a musician. And, but I went to Tufts University, majored in international relations, but also took music with Lucy Lawrence. I'd gone to Tanglewood, which is a wonderful camp. This is all very, very classical. And just didn't have enough credits to major in both music and international relations, but music was a really strong, minor. And then thought, oh, okay, I'll audition for an orchestra and I'll get a job. And it's not like that. There's almost no jobs. And that was also a wake-up call. And that if you just keep on this path, what music do you really end up doing, and where do you end up going? And I feel like when I went to Israel in between undergraduate and graduate school, and it was there that I really started working with folk musicians, and this light bulb moment that, oh, I could maybe arrange music and play whatever music I want. I don't have to be on this track that somehow I can't deviate from. It was in my 20s, and that's when I switched to really starting to arrange and to play different music. But I always had my pedal harp because you get gigs on the pedal harp, right? So all these, the weddings, and then I even played some with the orchestra in Israel when we moved to Israel later. And I just recently sold my pedal harp, and it was like a shock for people. And it's like, well, I moved to Shetland 3 years ago, and I don't know where I'm going to move and play with this big harp. I want to do folk music, and I already tour and play and arrange with it. My harp's sitting in the corner. I'd rather sell it to somebody who really is going to use it. It should have a life, not that I have to pay to schlep it somewhere and then store it and whatever. So somebody who is really into composition, this artist, dancer kind of, creative soul. And so it's on its next life. And it was almost worth selling it just for the shock value that I would sell it. And I thought, well, maybe it'll pay for my kitchen. I don't know. My priorities have changed.
Oh, that's great. Wow. So what prompted you in the middle of your college life to go to Israel for a year or a summer?
Yeah. So I went to Sri Lanka and to Israel. So I wanted experience with international relations. I was interested in, I don't know, somehow making a difference, women's health, go off to some country and feel like I can tangibly see that I was part of change. So I went to Sri Lanka and I volunteered with a grassroots organization, lived for a while up in a village. And, my name's Sunita. My dad taught Hindi. My dad was a linguist. And Sunita is an Indian name, but it's a name used from Afghanistan to Sri Lanka. So I had a normal name when I was there. And I was part of a team with a doctor and a nurse that were American, or Filipino nurse and American doctor. And they had, what seems to us normal names. And in Sri Lanka, they were strange names in a way. And so I felt like that had opened a door for me, and it was kind of exciting, but I realized I wasn't really trained enough to make the kind of difference I thought. And then I went to Israel and studied with Judith Leiber, the harpist with the Israel Philharmonic. And so, because then I thought when I go to graduate school, then I'll really know what I want to do and I'll have experience. And everything just fell in place for music. I subbed actually with the Jerusalem Symphony for half a season. I started working with folk musicians. I fell in love. It was harp it was a time of blossoming. And I thought, well, if I wanted to make a difference, I should really go back and learn sciences or medicine or something. And it seemed like the path of least resistance, or somehow the path was opening for music. But then I made it hard for myself. I thought, I'm only going to apply to one school and I want a scholarship. And if I don't get it, then it's not meant to happen. So I went to Manhattan School of Music. I got funding, and there I went. And I just met my husband. Well, he was my boyfriend. And I said, come to New York with me. And he's like, what? I just met you in Israel. He's from Scotland originally. And so I dragged him to New York, went to Manhattan School of Music, still in the classical route, but with much more of an ear for folk music. And so I was trained classically with the notes, with the music, starting to do arranging, but it was a long, long process for me because I was glued to the notes, but I knew theory and I knew chords and started to work with music in a much more holistic way, like really listening and where's the rhythm, where does it go, rather than taking it slow and sort of obeying. And it was such freedom. There was no job waiting for me at the end of school. You're waiting for the auditions to happen and wherever. And took a year off and traveled the world and took my first real folk harp. It was built by Jack Ewell. They call him a Clarsach here in Scotland. And it's 34 strung, gut strings, which were like my pedal harp. So I felt like I could get the kind of tone I wanted, but much more portable, very just beautiful, and in a wooden case. And this is back in the day that, when I flew with British Air, that was like, oh, it's an instrument. Oh, how nice. Of course it's oversized and whatever. Of course we'll take a harp, And so I flew around the world without a problem with it and spent a year on the folk harp. And I think that was really the turning point, is actually really spending time with it. So then I got more into therapeutic harp and working more and more with other musicians, where I feel like if I show up with a folk harp, then I'm not this giant, in the room. I can take it with me in the car, and then we can try harp and oud, or we can try harp and fiddle, and just so many more doors opened for the Celtic harp. I think in a way that maybe would have earlier, I just didn't know to show up with a Celtic harp, or I didn't have the skills either of what to do with it if I don't have a part. I mean, this is what's wonderful about Afghan Press and Melodies Music, is that now there's a huge collection of arrangements you can go to. I didn't have that growing up, and it's a whole different world out there now. I feel like people say, oh, I wish I'd learned as a kid. And it's like, no, it's a great time to learn the harp now, because you can really find your genre, and there's all kinds of music and different kinds of teachers and events out there that I only had master classes in classical music, which I learned a lot from. I'm not, I still love classical music. It just wasn't my voice.
Fascinating. So you mentioned your first arranging. What was the driving factor behind that first arrangement that you did?
Oh, pure maybe frustration and shame. That how can I not just sit behind my instrument and join the other musicians? So I ended up renting an apartment with 3 other people. They were looking it was a 4-bedroom apartment, looking for, musicians and artists. I thought, great, this is a place for me. And this crazy clarinetist sort of was the one that had the apartment, and he would have jam sessions till 2 a.m. People would bring guitars and whatever. And it's like, oh, you have a harp. Great. Bring out your harp. And I'm like, where's my part? I'll join you, but I need my part. Or what key are you in? What are the chords? I all of a sudden realized, wow, I only know music from one direction. I can't just dive in. I want to be able to just sit and jam with you. I need to learn how to do this. And there was an amazing flutist that had always wanted to play with harp, but had an old style klezmer band, taught me beautiful old traditional Jewish music. A storyteller of Ladino. Ladino is the language of the Jews goes back to the Iberian Peninsula. So it's not Latin. It's old, sort of old Castilian, and there's Hebrew and other words mixed in with it. But there's this sort of Spanish essence, and the stories are just hilarious. She was a storyteller in Ladino, and she wanted to do programs with harp. So I learned Ladino folk songs, and she would tell stories. And so I started learning Ladino music, which actually worked really well on the harp, and different Jewish music. And so when I moved back to the States, I already worked with people who had a lot of patience and passion that wanted to work with the harp. So they were like, okay, think of this rhythm. Here's the chords. Wow, what a gift that these people gave of their time, so that I kind of was cradled and encouraged to arrange for the harp. And so I did a bunch of music for Jewish weddings, and people knew that I'd lived in Israel or was living in Israel, and asked for an arrangement. I have to play for a Jewish wedding. Where's their music? And so I was just giving people music. And my husband said, well, you have enough for a book. You should do a book of Jewish wedding music. He's more of an entrepreneur. I'm just like, well, here's a scrap of paper. Here, you can do this. You can do that. So you should do something with this. It was published. Then we published it. Then Sylvia Woods picked it up. So I started with Jewish wedding music, and then, added more Jewish music, and then other music that I love to play, and then related to albums. And it just kept going because there was this supportive environment really in the States that wanted businesses that wanted harp arrangements and books, because there was the need. It was like growing. It was like the right time to get in. I think now it's a little bit harder because there's so much out there, like to say, hi, I'm here, and I got in there when it's like, okay, great. What do you have next? Here, write some more music. We'll publish it. We'll sell it. So that was good timing in that sense.
And a lot of harpists have enjoyed using that Jewish wedding book. People like that type of music.
I fell in love with it. Passion of love of the Jewish music, just the depth of it. But it makes me feel a little responsible, like, oh no, all these people are playing the same, like 6 tunes for I don't know how many weddings. I should really have done like 3, 4, and 5, but then they're under copyright, and then different music's played in Israel versus than what's in the States. So I kind of sort of removed myself from it. But it's a thought to come out with something that people would want to hear now.
Well, also, you just came out with a book of Shetland tunes, because now you're living in Shetland. Tell us about your move to there.
Yeah. I made what seems like an extreme move, but for me, it feels full circle. So I'm from Minnesota, which we think of as, a lot of Scandinavians settled there. The football team is the Vikings. And in Shetland, this is really the land of the Vikings. Vikings settled in Shetland. And the old language here, Norn, was an old Nordic language. And actually, Shetland, the history, it was like pawned off to, there was, royal weddings. It was pawned off to Scotland. And then, Denmark, Norway, they thought they could get it back, but Scotland didn't give it back. So there's this strong Viking heritage here. And, nobody locks their doors and they wave to you in the street, just sort of like when I grew up in the suburbs of Minnesota. And my husband was born and raised in Edinburgh. And we had taken a cycling trip. We thought we'd take a break for half a year. Israel is passionate and amazing and very intense. And we both wanted to just get away for half a year. And so we cycled basically from Rome to Shetland and back down, and then around through Greece and Turkey, and then Cyprus, and then back. Actually, we were just going to go to Edinburgh, and then we thought, well, now we're here, let's take the ferry. We've never been up to Shetland. And then we got to Lerwick, which is 2 hours almost, for an hour and a half for me from now, and met somebody who said, oh, we're like so proud. We're in a cafe, like, wow, we made it this far north. It's like, no, you should go all the way up to Unst. And so we went all the way up here, and we spent like time in Shetland at sort of this window of when it barely rained and wasn't as windy. And people said, oh, it can get pretty fierce here. And I was like, this is nothing, no problem. And we just fell in love with Shetland. And we saw a lot of old stone houses that need saved, because people built new houses and they, for a lot of different reasons, didn't fix up the old houses. And so we thought maybe it'd be a summer home. We'll buy an old stone house, fix it up, and this could be summers, because Israel is really, for me, miserable in the summer. It's way too hot. Then we bought it, and it needs massive renovation and restoration. And it was like during COVID, and we thought it'll never get done unless we actually move here. And this is a window of opportunity. I felt caught a bit in Israel with this. Israel's expensive. You're doing gigs, so you can afford your car, so that then you get stuck in traffic, and so that you can afford the gas, so that you can do another gig, so that you have a harp. And I thought, I want time to be really creative. My daughter isn't married. She's living in Israel. Don't have grandchildren there. This is my window of opportunity. Spend my 60s in Shetland. So we did it. We took the plunge, and here I am. And so it felt like a real evolution, but it's like shocking to people. They're like, where? And where's Shetland? And what are you doing? And so it's like fun just for the shock factor, because I didn't really know that much about Shetland. You hear about Shetland ponies, or there's knitting, or, it's up there somewhere, but to know, oh, it's an overnight ferry from Aberdeen, and it's really straight across from Bergen, Norway. I know that now, but I think I didn't when I even learned a few Shetland tunes. And the first Shetland tune I learned from an arrangement, probably published by African Press, maybe, I'm not sure, Sleep Soon in the Morning by Kim Robertson. And it's a Shetland tune. And so I learned that before I even really knew much about Shetland, just sort of the name Shetland. So yeah, here I am, all the way up in Shetland, where there's a bit too much wind, I think, but land of the midnight sun. It's like really beautiful energy in the summer. I can't wait till our house is finished and we're right on the sea. It was a good idea, but a lot more work than I thought. So I'm just getting to more arranging now because it's been a lot of sweat equity going into our house.
Fantastic. And as you're up there, you run these tours every year. So tell us a little bit about how people can get involved in the tours and what they consist of.
So I have actually 2 Shetland harp retreats. This year I started Shetland harp retreats where you can come up here for a week and really delve into musicality and working on music and just be inspired by being able to walk out the door to the sea. So it's not really a tour, but I have them in Shetland. And then I've been for almost 10 years now doing a tour across Scotland that is starting in Edinburgh, finishing in Edinburgh, but that goes all the way to Orkney and Shetland and back. And my husband runs, it's more of an advocacy business now, but it's really started as a tour company, Green Olive Tours in Israel, which is really up close and personal, understanding situation, meeting people, going in out of the way places. And we thought, why don't we team up? I know a lot of Scottish harpists from coming to Scotland, visiting Fred's family. Why don't we organize a tour that way of doing something really sort of special, seeing some of the key things, but meeting harp builders and other harpists and workshops. And so we created this Scottish harp journey. I do that every June usually. And then I decided this is a great idea, going away, getting inspired. I had 3 students online in Italy at one point, and I thought, why didn't I go to Tuscany? So I started a harp retreat in Tuscany, just week long to go get inspired with beauty. So I think I'm going to keep it at that. Tuscany, maybe once a year I do Scotland and then bring more people up to Shetland. I was so inspired going to Tanglewood and the idea of just getting away from your regular routine and focusing on the harp. You leave with maybe, a whole new insight and energy that just weekly lessons are crucial, but it's a whole different push kind of. And I love teaching. I want to be part of that. So I've been doing a lot more of that than writing my books, but I have a whole bunch of books almost ready. So I've been playing and hearing Shetland music. So I thought I should arrange some for the harp. And I really love being a musician here because it's something that's so part of the culture. And not so much the harp, but it's super respected. Wow, there's a harp player here. And there was a nonprofit setting up sound stations across this is the most northerly small island, to get people to maybe walk further to the edge of some viewpoints. And there's at the top of a hill, they thought this is a perfect place for seeing the northern lights. And so there's a bench, and they asked me if I would play a piece or compose a piece. And so at the top of this hill, which is really windswept, so they wanted to be able to push a button and hear something with harp for the Northern Lights. So I've, as a classical player, I'm thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to look up for Northern Lights pieces. And it's no, I should compose a piece. I should create something for the harp that would really be sort of the sense and sound and movement of the Northern Lights. So I'm on that sound bench. I feel now I'm part of Unst. I felt really welcomed as a musician here. And I don't know of any other book that's just Shetland tunes. And I'm working on some compositions inspired by the Northern Lights and teaming up with a photographer. So we could do some stuff on video where it's time lapse of the Northern Lights, and also just working with the idea of light and texture and sound. That's not just a melody. I've always been such a melody person in melodies, but what if we worked with this, sense of the sky and movement, and but a lot of the sort of feathery stuff I do, it's really scares people when it's written out. So I'm still working on that, but I'm going to come up with a book of that, some more Shetland tunes, and solo harp book 2, which was one of my first books of just some of the favorite folk music that I loved. Then I'm going to do a compilation of Jewish music that is under copyright for some of the music that people are still really looking for now. And that's just in the pipeline. And then I have all these other ideas. So I feel like it's a creative space for me.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing your harp journey with us today, Sunita. It's been very exciting and encouraging.
It's my honor. Really, thank you for reaching out to me.
And all of Sunita's music is available on folkharp.com and Afghan Press. And to close, we have another recording by Sunita, Spootiskeri, from her new book, Shetland Tunes. Thank you for listening today. If you liked this episode, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. Share the Melody Makers podcast with your family, friends, and favorite home renovators. On behalf of Melody's traditional music and Afghan Press music for the harp, this is Gretchen Munson wishing you a joyful, music-filled day.